Do you have an update on that leak of the 1.7 million dead and missing? And is it also like wounded? Because when I first read it, it was 1.7 million dead and missing. And
Right.
you know, so
I That's my understanding, that it's 1.7 million dead and missing. And that's the way it's usually reported. Now, sometimes I've heard people talk about it and then they'll throw in the word wounded. And that completely changes it, because
right,
wounded could be two-thirds of it. And so, we're only talking about, I don't know,
still a
if
lot,
that's the
but
case, yeah, it'd still be a lot, but maybe a million dead and missing. Um, so that would change it entirely. But as far as I understand, it really is, and that was just, people sometimes misspeaking or speaking a little bit too loosely. I don't really know. I'll have to just actually defer in this case to Alexander Mercouris, who has been following this, and he says that a lot of different people are going through the information. Apparently quite a bit, if not all of the information has been released, and they're finding that in general, I don't know, maybe not entirely, that it's holding up. That these people really are gone, and they were real people, and they're no longer among the
and
living. Yeah, it seems to
or just
be.
not in Ukraine, right? Many of them could
Yeah,
have.
there's right. There may be other explanations. That's true. They may have deserted, fled. We don't know. I don't know what the proportions are. Um, yeah, interestingly, for some reason, Zelensky lifted the prohibition against younger men from leaving the country. It used to be that like anybody between the ages, I can't remember, 18 and 60 were not allowed, men were not allowed to leave Ukraine. And then that 18 to 24, that segment has been removed from that prohibition. And it began yesterday. And apparently there are long lines at the borders of young men just, trying to get out of the country. So I think that's actually very good news, because these are men that will not be killed, that they cannot be grabbed by the TCC. This is what I've heard. But then there's another story that said actually like they need to sign up with the TCC first, but it shows that, maybe they're not being grabbed. It's just understood how unpopular it would be if they started grabbing the younger men in Ukraine. And so if they can get out of the country, that'll bring out about it. That means lives are going to be saved. Again, Ukraine will lose. It'll lose sooner, and it will lose with, there will be more Ukrainian young men who survive this. I wish them the best. I hope all of them get across the border.
Why would Zelensky do something like that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It just may be that he's feeling a lot of pressure. It's just, again, we can see how, from all these videos, even the ones that take place in, the TCC guys, the press gang guys grabbing people. It even happens in Western Ukraine, which is, again, the bedrock of ultranationalism. But, the common people do not like this, obviously. And you can see it from the reactions of people around, like just passersby and whatever will just will intervene and try to help the guy. So there must be a great deal of resentment against this, and maybe he's just responding to the pressure. That's the only explanation that I can think of.
Something that maybe this is what I'm thinking is if I was in charge and I understood that right now there's no way I can win this war. My troops are being slowly depleted. But I understand that as long as I have troops, nobody's going to come to my aid. So maybe you just say jettison these people and then say, look, there is nothing here, nobody left.
Yeah.
You have to come now, because now we have hit that empty bar, and now you have to come in and help us. Possibly, because I mean, like, what?
Yeah.
So far, that's all you've been doing is just been thinking, like, what's the point? Okay, maybe I will kill all the 18 to 24-year-olds, and maybe he has some conscience in there
Maybe.
somewhere, and is just like, well, I can't just, I've already killed everybody between, 25 and 60 they're all 1.7 million dead or missing, tons of fled, so I shouldn't just, this is the future of the country, right? This is the youth right here, 18.
Right.
These are the ones that will have children and bring in the next generation. Kill those. There's just no Ukraine. So
Right.
maybe just let them all go and then tell Western Europe, it's like, you told us, this is it. You got to come in.
Yeah, you may be right. I really don't, have a better explanation. Just that may
Yeah,
be
it's
true.
it's very. I mean, it's surprising. I'm surprised when you told me that. So I'm just
Right,
trying to figure out some way that how would you be okay with that, because it just doesn't seem normal for Zelensky to
right,
care
right.
about the lives of of the people of Ukraine
Yeah,
anymore. Well, yeah. Well, we'll just have to. This is just an ongoing tragedy. Does it look anything changing on the front? Are we looking at the big developments?
yeah. No, it's the same thing. It's a siege essentially. I think it's fair to call a siege of Prokofsk, Konstantinovka, and Kupiansk. And I think in all three of those cities, there's some pretty good evidence that the Russians are actually already inside the city. I think especially in the case of Kupiansk. And these are one thing to, then the fourth one is Seversk, where maybe they haven't really come up to the outskirts of, it's a small town, but a very important one, they're described. So it's not quite a siege yet, but they're getting there. Um, all of these actually have been kind of like threatened by the Russians. The Russians approached these places long ago. Actually, in the case of Seversk, I remember it quite well. It was 2022. The Russians took Severodonetsk and then Lysychansk, and then like the next one was Seversk. Because they took those two actually pretty good sized cities, Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, fairly quickly. And then they started marching towards Seversk, and everybody seemed to expect that, Seversk is going to fall now. Now, here's 3 years later. So they got there. Apparently, it was very well defended, and the Ukrainian commander there was, one of their best. And it's also the terrain was very much to the advantage of the Ukrainians. So the Russians just stopped, and they just didn't do anything there for better than 2 years. And it's only this year that you began to see movement, and now it looks like they've taken some of those high points that the Ukrainians held, and it looks like Seversk's days are numbered. And then, like in the case of Kupiansk, I remember it was actually in 2023. It was during the Ukraine's summer offensive that year. The one place where the Russians advanced was actually towards Kupiansk. They made a kind of a fairly rapid advance, and they got close to it, relatively close, and then stopped. But again, that was 2 years ago. But this year, again, they've made some very, very significant advances, and they have taken a lot of territory around Kupiansk. So there's where there was no movement in these cities, or the case of Pokrovsk, remember they came close to Pokrovsk in the fall, and then nothing much happened. It was just, they slowly started to move around it. But again, this year it accelerated. So we've seen an acceleration around all these cities where in some cases there was really no movement for almost 3 years. And then, now all of them I think are likely to fall, within by the end of this year. And that's going to just change the complete, the and again, there's just not going to be much left of Donetsk. And then it just opens the way for the Russians to make much more rapid advances. We've seen when these important cities fall, then they can really move forward. So anyway, that's the situation I described last time. And it's basically the same. I just wanted to mention like how these actually cities have been in play for a long time. And now it's this year where we're seeing that they're likely to fall.
When do you think we'll see an end of this war?
Yeah, I don't. I think it's possible it could end. I don't think it's going to end this year. It could end next year, but it could even go on for like another 3 years or more. I'll just be honest, this has gone on a lot longer than any of us thought. I think, and it depends on how far the Russians choose to go. Are they going to stop? I don't think they're going to stop at the Dnieper, because again, they have laid claim to Kherson, and that is on the other side of the Dnieper.
What about
And
Odessa?
I think it's very likely that they'll go to Odessa, again, that's a region of the country that's very favorable to them and a very important one. It's right there, very close to the Black Sea. But that also is going to raise the alarm bells for in Europe and in the West in general. I mean, I know like Macron himself says like we just can't let Odessa fall. They seem to have a particular. They understand like if Odessa falls, then Ukraine and all the NATO dreams of having access to the Black Sea, that's over. So that's. I think they might, hold their horses if the Russians stop at the Dnieper, if they go no farther than Kherson Oblast. But if they start marching towards Odessa, that might be the point. If it doesn't happen, that might be the point where we see some real reckless action on the part of the West.
If Ukraine is cut off from the Black Sea completely, I mean, was that a huge blow to countries like France? Like only if they're in their imperial hegemonic mindset, right?
Right. Well, yeah, that's right. I mean, it's just like, but this is but they have that mindset. And this is really probably the main reason that the Russians are fighting this war. Apparently like even like prior to the launch of the SMO, the Russians learned that that changes were being made to the port, of Odessa, I believe it was Odessa, that to actually make it conform to NATO specifications. It just was clear that NATO had its eyes on it. Okay, we can't get Sevastopol. The Russians have taken Crimea, but we can do the same thing. We can have our port right here on the Black Sea. And I think that's that's something that the NATO really wants.
It's so stupid though. Why would you want that? Like, because if you are in a war with Russia, then that port is done. It's gone.
Yeah, right,
it's just destroyed.
Yeah,
all your boats are there, or they're sunk.
But yeah, basically it's just a provocation. It's kind of the equivalent of having the military bases in Iraq. They're just big, juicy targets for the Iranians. I think, but I don't know, these people just can't give up on their imperial dreams.
Well, it's like what Jeffrey Sachs says. I think it is for them just like the game of Risk. They just want to put our pieces everywhere. And it's just fun for them to put their piece there. Right.
Yeah, it's the way that I think that they learned to think that way. And especially, there was a time when they could get away with that kind of behavior,
Who
back
came
in the
up
90s.
With that game? Maybe that's the person we need to blame. Maybe that's what raised a whole generation of psychopathic imperialists,